There are thoughts many women carry quietly for most of their lives, not because those thoughts are shameful, not because they're dangerous, but because for generations, women were taught that desire should be controlled, muted, or kept invisible. Men were encouraged to want, women were encouraged to behave. And that imbalance has created one of the biggest misunderstandings in modern relationships. Because silence around desire doesn't make it disappear, it just pushes it underground. And when desire goes underground, intimacy slowly starts to die. Today, we're changing that. In this video, I'm breaking open a conversation most people avoid. I'm sharing four of the most common sexual fantasies women have, fantasies that are far more normal than society admits, yet rarely spoken about openly. By the end of this video, you won't just know what women fantasize about, you'll understand why they do. And that understanding alone can completely change the way you show up in relationships. I'm Magda Kay, your trusted men's health advisor, and I want you to stay with me until the end, because fantasy number three surprises almost every man who hears it. It's incredibly common, yet almost never acknowledged. If you want to understand female desire beyond stereotypes and surface level advice, hit the subscribe button. Because today, we're not staying comfortable. We're getting honest. Why we don't talk about sexual fantasy is one of the most misunderstood parts of human psychology. The moment the topic comes up, people get tense. They worry about being judged. They worry about being misunderstood. And women in particular worry about being labeled. From a young age, many women learn that expressing desire makes them too much, too needy, too wild, too inappropriate. So instead of exploring desire openly, they internalize it. But internalized desire doesn't vanish, it evolves. It becomes imagination. And imagination, when given space, is powerful. Multiple studies in sexual psychology show that women often experience arousal in a more context driven way than men. Their desire is shaped by emotion, environment, safety, imagination, and meaning. That doesn't make female desire weaker, it makes it more layered. In fact, research suggests women often respond with arousal to a wider variety of scenarios than men, even scenarios they would never choose in real life. That's the key distinction most people miss. Fantasy is not intention. Fantasy is exploration. It's the mind playing with emotion, power, curiosity, novelty, and identity. Once you understand that, fantasy stops being threatening. It becomes informative. So let's talk about the most common fantasies. Not to shock, but to understand. Fantasy number one, intimacy with a stranger. One of the most frequently reported fantasies among women involves intimacy with someone they don't know. Psychologist Justin Lemiller's research found that nearly two-thirds of women have imagined some form of sexual encounter with a stranger. Often, the scenario is spontaneous. A brief connection, a shared glance, a moment where names, history, and expectations don't exist. This fantasy isn't about replacing a partner, and it isn't about dissatisfaction. It's about novelty. The human brain is wired to respond strongly to new experiences, new faces, new voices, new energy. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with excitement and motivation, spikes when something feels unfamiliar. A stranger represents possibility, no past, no pressure, no role to maintain. As relationship therapist Esther Perel explains, erotic desire thrives on mystery, not necessarily mystery in the form of secrecy, but mystery in the form of the unknown. In long-term relationships, people often become predictable. Predictability creates safety, which is essential. But too much predictability can reduce excitement. Fantasy fills that gap. Imagining a stranger allows the mind to experience curiosity without consequences. It's freedom without risk. And here's what many men misunderstand. This fantasy isn't about wanting someone else. It's about wanting to feel seen without expectation. When attraction first forms, there's no performance pressure, no fear of disappointing, just presence. That feeling is intoxicating. Understanding this can dramatically shift how you approach attraction. You don't need perfect lines. You don't need exaggerated confidence. You need presence, eye contact, genuine curiosity, calm energy. When a woman feels no pressure, her imagination opens. And when imagination opens, attraction follows. Fantasy number 2, power and control. Another incredibly common category of fantasy revolves around power dynamics. Research consistently shows that many women imagine scenarios involving either surrendering control or taking control. Around 65% report fantasies about being dominated in some way. Nearly half report fantasies about being the one in charge. This often confuses people. They assume it's about aggression or weakness. It isn't. Power fantasies are psychological. For many women, daily life involves managing responsibility, work, family, emotional labor, decision making. Constant control is exhausting. So the idea of surrender in a safe, consensual context can feel deeply relaxing. Surrender doesn't mean vulnerability without protection. It means trust. It means feeling so secure with someone that you can let go completely. That's not weakness. That's intimacy. On the other side, fantasies about dominance are about empowerment. Being in control can feel playful, confident, and affirming, especially in a society that often discourages women from expressing authority in intimate spaces. Both forms of fantasy explore the same core elements: trust, safety, emotional intensity. Power play and imagination allows people to step outside everyday identity. It's not about who you are, it's about who you're allowed to be for a moment. And here's something important for men to understand. When a woman imagines surrender, she's not imagining being overpowered, she's imagining being held emotionally and psychologically. That level of trust is one of the deepest compliments a partner can receive. Fantasy number 3, group experiences. This is the fantasy that surprises most men because it challenges assumptions. More than half of women report imagining some form of group sexual scenario, most commonly a threesome. Some imagine being the focus of attention. Some imagine watching. Some imagine their partner with another woman. And immediately, fear kicks in. Men assume this means dissatisfaction or a desire to act it out. That assumption is incorrect. Fantasy does not equal desire for real world action. Fantasy is symbolic. Group fantasies often revolve around themes of being desired, variety, curiosity, attention. The brain craves stimulation. New combinations activate dopamine. Fantasy gives the brain permission to explore that stimulation without risk. For many women, imagining multiple people isn't about betrayal. It's about feeling wanted, feeling chosen from multiple directions. And sometimes, fantasy explores contrast, not replacement. It's important to understand this distinction. A person can deeply love their partner and still imagine variety, because imagination doesn't follow moral rules. It follows emotional curiosity. When partners understand this, fantasy stops being scary. It becomes neutral, just a mental landscape. Fantasy number 4, public or semi-public settings. Another widely reported fantasy involves intimacy in places where discovery feels possible. Cars, elevators, outdoor locations, hidden corners of familiar environments. The excitement doesn't come from being seen, it comes from almost being seen. Psychologists call this transgression arousal. When we cross invisible boundaries, adrenaline increases. Heart rate rises, awareness sharpens, that heightened state amplifies sensation. The same mechanism makes roller coasters exciting, or adventure sports thrilling. When paired with intimacy, it intensifies emotion. This fantasy often reflects a desire to break routine. Daily life can become repetitive. Fantasy reintroduces spontaneity. It reminds the mind what excitement feels like. What fantasy really reveals. These fantasies are not random. They point to deeper emotional needs. Stranger fantasies reflect curiosity and freedom. Power fantasies reflect trust and relief. Group fantasies reflect attention and novelty. Public fantasies reflect spontaneity and excitement. Fantasy is symbolic language. It tells us what emotions want expression. And here's the most important insight: fantasy does not indicate dissatisfaction. Research shows people in stable, loving relationships often report richer fantasy lives. Why? Because safety gives the mind permission to wander. Fantasy isn't replacing intimacy, it's accompanying it. The real threat isn't imagination, it's silence. When people feel they must hide parts of themselves, distance grows. When they feel accepted, connection deepens. You don't need to act out fantasies to benefit from them. You just need to listen. Sometimes the most powerful response is simply, "Thank you for trusting me with that." Trust itself is erotic. How fantasy changes over time. Desire evolves. What excites someone at 20 may not excite them at 40. Life experience matters, confidence matters, healing matters. Expecting desire to remain static is unrealistic. Long-term attraction survives through curiosity, not repetition. And here's something many men were never taught: emotional safety is foreplay. When a woman knows she won't be judged, mocked, or punished for honesty, her desire opens naturally. Freedom is seductive. At the same time, openness doesn't mean obligation. Not every fantasy needs to be shared. Privacy and intimacy can coexist. The goal isn't full disclosure. The goal is emotional permission, knowing that if you wanted to share, you could. That knowledge alone changes relationship dynamics. Final thought: fantasy isn't dangerous, silence is. Desire doesn't need to be controlled, it needs to be understood. When imagination has space to breathe, it builds connection instead of distance. Real intimacy isn't about perfection, it's about presence. So talk, listen, laugh. Fantasies aren't confessions, they're windows into imagination. And the more you understand them, the more deeply you understand yourself and your partner. If this video changed how you think about female desire, subscribe, leave a comment, and tell me which part surprised you the most. I read every single one. Thanks for watching.